consumable items can do some incredible things, such as enabling you to one-shot the final boss of the original Final Fantasy, or even, with well-timed usage, helping you to avoid a full wipe in Final Fantasy X-2 against devilish foes like Chak. Pulling off these feats just requires a bit of extra knowledge of how each game functions and the depths of their systems. Because when most people think about items, they often think about things like potions and ethers, consumables that are there to help top up pretty standard mechanics such as HP and MP, or revive fallen party members. They seldom think about how items can be used to manipulate games, pushing everything in their favour. But that's what we're going to be covering in this video, as we focus on items that are either classified as consumable or key, and how they can be used to break their respective games. As usual, we'll only be looking at one item per entry in the franchise, and this time we're going to highlight entries that were selected by you, the viewers. So if you're wondering why we haven't included things like the Holy War from Final Fantasy VIII, that's because this is our second video on the topic, and the previous video is linked in the description below. So let's dive straight in with a broken item from the original Final Fantasy. Back in 1987, home console role-playing games were still in their infancy. Dragon Quest had forged a path the year before, surprising gamers and developers alike with how they simplified what was rather a complicated genre. And at the centre of this was the command-based menu system. In that original Dragon Quest, there were 4 potential commands for characters to perform in combat: fight, run, spell, and item. The original Final Fantasy then mirrored this, but an extra command was added called drink, because the item command had its function changed. In the original Dragon Quest, it was there to let player characters heal wounds by using any medicinal herbs that were in their possession. But in the original Final Fantasy, the item command allowed characters to use weapons and armor to cast spells that were A, normally locked behind a certain type of mage, and B, used without consuming any spell charges. And the item wasn't even consumed when doing so. This granted access to a wide range of spells, each offering different utility. But perhaps one of the most broken came after acquiring the Giant's Glove from the Sunken Shrine. When used via the item command, the Giant's Glove cast Saber, a spell that increased the caster's own attack and accuracy. In normal circumstances, this spell was quite useless, as it could only be cast by a black wizard, and they were unlikely to be serving as anyone's primary damage dealer. But let's say you had a monk in your setup, and they were able to get to the point where their unarmed attack was pretty strong. If you then had them use the Giant's Glove to cast Saber on themselves at the start of an encounter, their unarmed damage received a significant boost, and this could make them strong enough to even one-shot Chaos. This next entry is a bit more unorthodox, as it's a key item as opposed to a consumable one, but it could be used to severely manipulate the damage-dealing capabilities of Rinoa in Final Fantasy VIII. Each character in the game had a unique limit break, and a unique method for obtaining new limit breaks. Irvine, for example, was able to attack using the shot limit break, which required players to mash the R1 button as many times as they could within a given time limit. And the type of shot Irvine had access to was determined by the ammo that resided in the player's inventory. In the case of Rinoa, she was able to combine with her faithful companion Angelo to perform a variety of different abilities. By default, Rinoa was able to use Angelo Cannon, which saw her mount Angelo onto her pinwheel before firing it at an enemy to create a massive explosion. Subsequent limit breaks could then be learnt from finding and reading various Pet Pal magazines that were scattered around the world and then doing some walking. But the ability used was not something that the player had any control over. It was instead determined by Rinoa's crisis level, a hidden mechanic that increased depending on how dire the party's situation was. At the lowest crisis level, Rinoa would use Angelo Cannon, and if Pet Pals Volume 6 had been read, then at the highest level, Wishing Star was used to deal 8 strikes for a maximum of 79,992 points of damage. The fun aspect here, however, was that if the ability associated with a specific crisis level had not been learned, then it would default to the next available ability. And this was when Pet Pals Volume 3 came into the equation. This granted access to Invincible Moon if the crisis level was 3, and when used, it made the party temporarily invincible. If Pet Pals Volume 1 and 6 had therefore not been read, This meant the only abilities available to Rinoa were Angelo Cannon and Invincible Moon. So, if Rinoa was able to maintain Crisis levels 3 or 4, which was possible if she was close to death and had the Aura status, she could be used to make the party invincible almost indefinitely, without even having to use Holy Wars. Final Fantasy V introduced quite a few new jobs into the mix, and one of the more unique was the Chemist. The main premise was to ensure items were more effective when used, and this was accomplished through a handful of different commands. Drink, for example, was brought back from the original Final Fantasy and made much more useful. This meant instead of using just potions and antidotes, players could drink things like the Goliath tonic, which doubled maximum HP. But for this entry, we're going to focus on the Mix command. This enabled chemists to combine two items together to make a new one. But although many of the items found in the game could be used, the game also introduced some purposeful mix items. And some of these were rather overpowered. We're going to focus though on the Dragon Fang. This could be farmed from World 1 from a forest near Istri, where they were a rare steal from mini dragons, but they could also be acquired as a drop from zombie dragons later on in the game. Once you had access to a nice pool, Dragon Fangs could then be combined with various other items to severely enhance your party. There was the Dragon's Kiss, which reclassified the target as both the Dragon type and a Heavy type, making them immune to fractional damage and instant death abilities. It was also possible to gain immunity to core elements through Dragon's Shield, as well as a powerful combination of defensive statuses through Dragon Armor. But the real game-breaking application came through Dragon Power. This ability was created through combining a potion with a Dragon Fang, and it increased the target's base level by 20, and it could be stacked. This meant it was possible to push a character's level all the way up to 255, severely increasing all of their stats. After being introduced in Final Fantasy II, Phoenix Downs became recurring items due to their usefulness. For if you lacked a magical way of reviving characters from the KO status, Phoenix Downs were always there, able to be used either in or out of battle. Quite often, because of the utility, they only revived a single character and brought them back with minimal health. But over the years, numerous variants of Phoenix Downs have been created, and one of the most powerful has to be the Mega Phoenix, which appeared in Final Fantasy X-2. Now, the Mega Phoenix itself first appeared in Final Fantasy VIII, where it could be used to revive all KO'd party members. It then returned in Final Fantasy X, with functionality enhanced to not only revive all KO'd party members, but also restore them to maximum HP. In Final Fantasy X-2, the functionality was similar, as Mega Phoenixes could revive all party members, albeit not to maximum HP. But there was also another major difference. Due to the dynamic nature of the so-called ATB Kai battle system that was used in place of the conditional turn-based battle system, timing came into play. And with perfect timing, this meant whoever used the Mega Phoenix could pull the party back from the brink. As in the absolute worst case scenario that could lead to a full party wipe, the Mega Phoenix could be used just before the moment of impact, with it then activating after the party died, before then reviving them and bringing them back into the fight. Due to the nature of this technique, it's quite hard to pull off, but if you knew what move was coming and had the timing down, Mega Phoenixes could be used to ensure you didn't ever see a game over screen, even against troublesome enemies like Chak. That then brings us onto a special item called the Primeval Brew, which started to be spoken about in the build-up to the release of Visions of Abyssia, the first part of the free add-on battle expansion for Final Fantasy XI. But at this point, nobody knew what the Primeval Brew actually did. They just knew it was going to cost 2 million Kruor. The exact function of this mysterious item then came up when the developers spoke to popular fansite FF Cyclopedia during their pre-launch media tour. Fans were asked to submit their questions, and one of them asked for clarification on what exactly a flask of Primeval Brew was, as its in-game cost was pretty significant. In response, the developers were rather candid, stating, "While the deepest secrets of this beatific beverage are not for us to reveal, its benefits include a plus 999 boost to all attributes, regen and refresh that restore 300 points of HP and MP every 3 seconds, and other effects sure to bewilder even the most brutal Abyssian fiends." When it then became available, players found out there was even more to the Primeval Brew than they realised. Upon consumption, it granted the Transcendency status for 3 minutes. As promised, this granted plus 999 to all attributes and regen and refresh with the promised potency. But it also set HP, MP, attack and defense to 9,999, set accuracy and evasion to plus 1000, granted regain of plus 500, and granted a magic attack bonus of plus 900 according to some user testing. In other words, the Primeval Brew made you into a literal god. The only downside was that if the brew was used by any member of an alliance during Gaia's Fate, victories towards Aeonic weapon progress were invalidated. Now, we've already spoken about one key item, which when used in isolation could influence the strength of a particular character. But there's another key item found in Final Fantasy IV that could be spent to influence the strength of any character. And that key item was the Pink Tail. This item has become infamous due to its punishing drop rate of 1 in 64, and that it could only be dropped from one enemy, Flam Princesses, in one dungeon, the Lunar Subterrane, and in one specific room in that dungeon, the Flam Princess room, which was located on floor B5. This meant trying to acquire Pink Tails could be quite tiresome, but you could at least increase the frequency by using the Siren item. When used, Sirens summoned the rarest cluster of monsters in that specific location, so when used in the Flam Princess room, they always summoned that enemy immediately. Pink Tails could then be traded with the father at the Adamant Isle Grotto for a piece of adamant armour, which was by far the strongest armour in the game. That then brings us onto our final entry, the hero drink from Final Fantasy VII, which served as a loose precursor to a similar item in Final Fantasy VIII that granted temporary invincibility. In Final Fantasy VII, hero drinks could be found in a few locations, while also appearing as a prize in the Chocobo Square. But instead of granting invincibility, it increased one ally's stats by a considerable amount. This meant strength, magic, defense, and spirit were all boosted by 30%. And what made this item quite broken was that it could even push characters beyond the normal cap of 255. In the most extreme instances, should the affected character already have 255 in each of those stats, then if multiple hero drinks were consumed on top of that, it could push their stats all the way up to 510 as the boost stacked to a cumulative maximum of 100%. This meant that even though characters affected by hero drinks weren't technically invincible, their stats were so high that they weren't far off. Stacking hero drinks could also be used as a way of enacting the damage overflow glitch, and if players made use of the W item glitch, then they would have plenty to go around. With that though, they were 7 overpowered items that broke Final Fantasy games, as selected by you, the commenters. Be sure to share in the comments below which of these you've also taken advantage of, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Alright everyone, with that, this is Daryl signing out. As always, I'd like to give a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, especially Benjamin Snow, Chris M. Walker, Christopher Gardner, Clever Chavez, EXP Required on YouTube, Gregory, and Stephen, who are super special Onion Knight supporters, and of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.